I gave my parents a cruise for their anniversary. They took my golden child Sibling instead. I still remember the moment when I decided to give my parents a cruise. It was like a lightning strike, not because the idea was brilliant but because I felt like I could finally do something that would make them proud of me. I'm 35 now and I'm still looking for that look in their eyes, the one that says, "Emily, you are good enough." Imagine. 2 weeks on a boat, blue ocean, sunset, their 40th anniversary. I wanted it to be perfect, and I did everything I could to make it happen. But damn it, I didn't think it would break my heart. It all started 6 months ago. I was sitting at my battered kitchen table scrolling through the cruise line's website. My fingers were trembling with excitement as I chose a suite with a balcony, not some cramped room in the hold, but true luxury. My parents, Ron and Linda, deserved this, I thought. They had worked all their lives, my dad at the factory, my mom at school, and had never allowed themselves anything like this. I imagined them standing on the deck, holding hands, laughing, remembering how they met. And I was their daughter who made it possible. This was supposed to be my moment. My big gesture. But let's be real, I'm not a millionaire. I work as a manager in a medium-sized company where half of my colleagues think Excel is a punishment from God. To pay for this cruise, I gave up everything. No vacations for myself. Goodbye, my dream of Mexico. No new boots, even though my old ones were falling apart. I even sold my old guitar, the one I used to play in college when I still believed I was going to be someone special. $1,800 for the tickets, plus additional expenses, sucked my savings down to the last cent. But I didn't complain. Every penny was worth it because I could imagine their faces. I kept it a secret until the very end. I wanted it to be a surprise. A month before their anniversary, I went to their house, an old house on the outskirts of town, smelling of coffee and old carpets. In my hands I had a box wrapped in golden paper, and inside was a postcard with details of the cruise. I remember how my dad raised his eyebrows and my mom pressed her hand to her chest. "Emily, are you serious?" she said, and I felt warmth in my chest. They hugged me and for a moment I thought, this is it. I had finally done something they would remember. But then something changed. Dad coughed and said, "This is too much, We'll think about how to organize it." Mom nodded and looked away. I didn't pay attention, thinking they were just surprised. I went home, intoxicated by the thought that I had given them something special. Weeks passed, I waited for them to call with plans, with excitement. But there were no calls. I called them myself, asking if they needed help with their luggage, if they wanted me to book a transfer. "We'll take care of it," my dad said every time, briefly as always. I didn't pay attention. Silly me. And then the day of their anniversary came. I was sitting at home, flipping through my phone, waiting for at least a message of gratitude. But nothing. The silence gnawed at me, but I told myself that they were just busy. Maybe the connection on the ship was bad. Maybe they'll call tomorrow. And then I opened Instagram and the world fell apart. Photo. My parents on the deck, smiling, glasses in hand. Next to them is Jake, my younger brother. Jake, wearing his stupid sunglasses with a big smile as if he were the king of the world. The caption reads, "Family trip for the anniversary. Best gift ever." I blinked. I looked at it again. My name wasn't there. I wasn't there. My heart was pounding as if it wanted to break out of my chest. I threw the phone on the couch but immediately grabbed it again to make sure I wasn't dreaming. But it was real. They had taken Jake. My brother, who hadn't put a dime into this, who didn't even know about my plans until I told my parents. I gave everything to make them happy and they chose him. The golden boy. The one who always got everything: attention, praise, love, even when I was busting my ass to be noticed. I sat there in my dim apartment and felt anger mixing with pain like acid in my throat. Why did they do this? Why wasn't I enough? And worst of all, why wasn't I surprised? The moment I saw Jake's photo on the ship turned everything upside down. I couldn't breathe. The apartment, which already seemed small, suddenly became cramped like a cage. I walked back and forth from the couch to the kitchen, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. But deep down inside I knew. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just, oops, we forgot to invite Emily. It was a choice. And that choice opened up a crack that had been stretching through my life since I was a little girl. Jake's shadow has always been there, and I've always been the fool who tried to jump over it. Jake is 4 years younger than me. He came along when I was old enough to feel everything changing. Before him, I was the only one little Emily with curls and big eyes, who drew flowers for my mom and helped my dad clean the garage. But when Jake was born, the world turned upside down. I remember my mom holding him for hours on end, whispering to him how special he was, and me sitting in the corner with a book, waiting for her to notice that I had finished my homework. My dad would come home from work and take him to play right away, and he would nod to me, "Good job, Em, go for a walk." I didn't complain. I was older. I had to be strong. But it didn't stop with childhood. Jake grew up and everything revolved around him. He had talent, not great but enough to make everyone gasp. He played soccer at school, and even though he was an average player, my dad went to every game shouting from the stands as if it were the Super Bowl. I won the science Olympiad in 9th grade, first place in the state, and you know what I got? My mom said, "Good for you, Emily," without even looking up from the TV. That night, Jake scored a goal and they took him out for pizza to celebrate. I stayed home, ate cold pasta, and told myself that it was normal. I didn't hate him then. He was just a kid like me. But over the years it got worse. In college, I worked nights to pay for my studies, gnawed at the granite of science, and graduated with honors. Jake failed the first semester, dropped out, and went to California to find himself. His parents paid for his ticket, gave him money for the trip, and when he returned a year later penniless, they bought him a car. They told me, "Emily, you'll manage on your own, you're smart." And I did. But every time I heard them praise him for living his own way, something inside me cracked. Now looking at this photo from the cruise, I could feel all these pieces of pain merging into one big wave. I had given everything, time, money, dreams, to give them this moment. And they chose Jake. Why? Because he's funnier at parties? Because he doesn't burden them with his life? Or because I've always been the one who can handle it, so I can just be pushed aside? I grabbed the phone, my fingers buzzing with anger. I wanted to write them everything, how I felt, how it hurt, how tired I was of being invisible. But I stopped myself. What would I say? "Why don't you love me the way you love him?" It sounded pathetic. I threw the phone on the table and went to the window. The night was dark, only a street lamp flickered, casting a faint light on the wet asphalt. I stood there and thought, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I tried too hard. Maybe I was never part of their plan. And then another thought came, sharp as a knife. Maybe they didn't even notice that I was gone. Maybe it wasn't a betrayal to them, but just a habit. Jake is their joy, their treasure, and I am just someone who is always there, who doesn't require attention. This thought hit harder than anger. Because if that's true, what do I even mean to them? I went back to the couch, sat down, and wrapped my arms around myself. My heart was pounding, but the tears wouldn't come. Not yet. I knew I had to do something. I had to talk to them. To find out the truth. But was I ready to hear it? And what if it destroys everything I've tried to save? I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, until the light of morning seeped through the blinds. The picture of Jake on the ship played in my head like a broken record, and each spin brought a new wave of anger. But underneath that anger was something worse, fear. Fear that if I opened my mouth and asked why, the answer would crush me completely. But I couldn't just sit there and swallow it. I needed the truth, even if it was as sharp as glass. So I decided to make the call. Right now. My hands were shaking as I dialed my mom's number. The dial tone was buzzing in my ears like a siren before a disaster. She picked up on the third ring. "Emily, hi honey." Her voice was light, as if she had just had tea on the veranda, not returned from a cruise I had paid for. I inhaled, trying to keep my composure. "Mom, I saw the pictures. You took Jake." Silence. A long, sticky silence that said more than any words. Then she coughed. "Oh yeah, we thought it would be fun for him." Fun for him. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I had given 6 months of my life to make them happy, and they just thought it would be fun for Jake? I squeezed the phone so hard my fingers turned white. "Mom, this was my gift. I planned it for you. Why didn't you tell me?" She sighed, the same sigh I'd heard 1,000 times when she was tired of my questions. "Emily, we didn't think you would want to come. You're always so busy working. And Jake was free, so we invited him." I felt the floor shake beneath me. Busy? Yes, I was busy saving every cent to pay for their dream. But I didn't say so. Instead, I squeezed it out. "You could have asked." My mom laughed briefly, nervously. "Well, you know how it is. It all happened so fast. We didn't want to bother you. Disturb?" I felt anger rising in my throat, hot and sour. But I held it back. "What does Dad think?" I asked. She handed him the phone. Is that you?" My dad's voice was gruff as usual, but there was a tinge of awkwardness in it. Stat. It's about the cruise. He hummed. It was a great trip, thank you. Jake had a great time. I held my breath. What about me? Didn't you think of me? He was silent, then said, we thought you'd be okay. You always do, Em. And that was it. No, I'm sorry. No, we were wrong. Just, you'll be fine. Just like always. I hung up without saying goodbye. The phone slammed on the table and I covered my face with my hands. Their words buzzed in my head like a swarm of bees. They hadn't just chosen Jake, they didn't even consider me a part of it. I was just a wallet, a tool that made their anniversary possible, and then it was set aside. And Jake? He was a guest at a party I organized. At my expense. I stood up and started pacing the room, my legs buzzing with tension. I wanted to scream, to break something, but I just clenched my fists. Why wasn't I enough? Why did my efforts never matter as much as his carefree smile? I remembered how my dad used to call him, our little champion, even when he didn't win anything. How my mom praised him for living in the moment when he quit another job. Me. I was the reliable Emily. The one who doesn't complain. The one who holds everything together. But this time I couldn't hold it together. Something inside me cracked and I felt the tears finally break through. They flowed in hot streams down my cheeks and I didn't stop them. I cried for every night I worked late, for every dream I gave up, for every time I told myself it was normal. I cried because I realized they didn't see me. Not really. When my tears dried, I sat down and looked at my phone. I needed to know more. Why did this happen? Was it a spontaneous decision or had they always planned it this way? And the worst part was, would they have noticed if I had just disappeared? I knew I had to talk to Jake. He was part of this, even if I didn't want to blame him. But first I had to gather my strength. Because if I started digging, I might find answers that would destroy everything I was still holding on to. After calling my parents, I sat in silence as if the world around me had frozen. Their words, "You'll be fine, we didn't want to bother you," were spinning in my head like a poisonous whirlwind. I felt empty but at the same time heavy, as if someone had put a stone on my chest. I couldn't just swallow it and go on with my life as usual. I needed to understand why I had always been a backup. And to do that, I started digging inside myself, into the memories that I had buried so deeply that they were already covered in dust. Each of them was like an old scar that stretched across my life. I remember my 10th birthday. I waited for it for weeks. My mom promised to bake a cake, my dad said he would buy me a bike. I imagined us all sitting around the table laughing like a real family. But that day Jake got sick, just a mild cold, nothing to worry about. And everything was cancelled. My mom spent the day with him and my dad mumbled that the bike could wait. I got a piece of a store-bought cupcake and a card that said, "Happy birthday." I was 10 and I told myself that it was okay that Jake was small, he needed it more. But that cupcake still sticks in my throat. Or the school graduation. I worked my ass off to graduate with honors. I dreamed that my parents would be in the audience, clapping when I received my diploma. But they didn't come. Jake had his stupid soccer tournament that day, he didn't even win, he just ran around the field. My mom called an hour before the ceremony. "Emily, we're not going to make it, I'm sorry." I stood on the stage alone, clutching that diploma until the paper crumpled in my hands, and smiled for the photo so that no one would see how much I was hurting. They didn't even ask me how it went. There were dozens of such moments. Every time I did something, whether it was my first job or a promotion or even when I bought my first car with my own money, their reaction was the same. A nod, a short "well done," and that was it. And then Jake would come home with something small, a new girlfriend, a stupid joke, a plan to go to the mountains, and they would light up. My mom would tell all the neighbors how talented he was. Dad called him our light. Me. I was the shadow that kept their world in order. Now sitting in my apartment I could feel those scars opening up, bleeding again. The cruise was not just a gift, it was my cry, my "look at me, I'm here." I gave everything so that they could see that I could be not just reliable Emily, but someone more. And they took it, trampled on it, gave it to Jake as if my efforts were just a backdrop to his life. I stood up, my legs shaking with anger. Enough is enough. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I decided to talk to Jake. Not to blame him, although I wanted to scream at him, damn it, but to understand. Did he know? Did he ask them to take him? Or did he even care? I dialed his number, my heart pounding in my chest. He answered after the second ring, his voice light and carefree as always. How are you?" I inhaled, trying not to explode. Jake, I mean about the cruise. Why did you go? He laughed briefly as if I'd asked something funny. Oh, it was great. Mom and Dad just said there was a spot available and I thought, why not? You know I love the sea. I clutched the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. He didn't even realize. For him it was just a bonus, another adventure handed to him on a plate. Jake, this was my gift. I paid for it. Silence. Then he said, wow, really? I didn't know it was that serious. They just invited me. I didn't know that I had turned myself inside out to make this happen. I didn't know that I had been waiting for this moment to feel like a part of the family. I hung up the phone without saying another word. His nonchalance was like a knife in the back. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't have to try. He was a golden boy and that was enough. I sat down on the floor, leaning on the wall. My anger gave way to something darker, doubt. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I waited too long? But then I remembered their faces in that photo. Smiling, happy without me. And I realized, this is not about my expectations. It's about the fact that I was never in their frame. And if I want to change that, I need to do something radical. Something that will make them see me or make me let them go forever. After talking to Jake, I felt like someone had sucked the air out of me. His slight, I didn't know, was ringing in my head like a bell. But it didn't calm me down, it only added fuel to the fire. He didn't know because he didn't need to know. He just took what was given to him, and I was always the one who gave, who sacrificed, who stayed behind. But this time I couldn't just swallow the insult and move on. I had to look them in the eye, all three of them. So I decided to organize a family meeting. Not for reconciliation but for the truth. I wanted to know if they had any shame left. I called my mom the next day. My voice was shaking but I kept it firm. Mom, I need to see you all. On Saturday at your house. I'll be there at 5. She hesitated, started to mumble about plans, but I interrupted. This is important. She agreed, although I could hear a hint of anxiety in her tone. Then I texted Jake, be there. He replied with an emoticon, silly wink as if it were a game. I wanted to smash my phone against the wall but I restrained myself. This was my chance. On Saturday I drove to my parents' house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my hands hurt. The road was familiar, old trees, shabby houses, the smell of autumn in the air. But inside I felt like a stranger. The house appeared before my eyes, the one where I grew up, where every corner had a memory of me trying to be enough. I parked, got out of the car and stood for a minute looking at the door. My heart was pounding but I knew that to back out would be to give up forever. My mom opened the door, her smile taut as a string. Emily, come in, we're just getting dinner ready. Dad was sitting in the living room flipping through the newspaper. Jake was lounging on the couch, flipping through his phone as if it were a normal evening. I took a breath and said, we need to talk. About the cruise. Silence fell like a stone in the water. Mom looked away, Dad put down the newspaper, Jake looked up and shrugged. I started. The words poured out hot and harsh. I paid for that cruise. I gave up everything, a vacation, things, time to make you happy. And you took Jake and didn't even ask me why. My mom clenched her hands, her voice trembling. Emily, we didn't think you would want to. You've always been so independent. Independent. The word cut like a knife. Dad added, we didn't want to burden you. Burden? I felt my anger boiling. Burden? I gave thousands of dollars and you say you didn't want to burden me? Jake stood up, his tone light, almost indifferent. I didn't know it was your idea. They just said let's go and I went. Don't get mad. I turned to him, my eyes burning. You didn't know because you don't need to know. You just take and I always pay. He frowned but did not answer. Mom tried to intervene. Emily, you don't have to be so dramatic. We are grateful to you. Grateful? I laughed dryly, painfully. Grateful? You didn't even mention me in that post. I don't exist for you. Dad stood up, his voice firm. That's enough. We've made our choice. You've always done well on your own and Jake, he needs us. Needs? I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. What about me? Don't I need you? Am I not your daughter? Silence. Mom cried but didn't come to me. Jake looked away. Dad just stood there as if I were a stranger. I realized. They didn't see me. Not as a person, not as a part of their lives. I was a tool that worked until it broke. Tears rolled down my cheeks but I didn't wipe them away. Do you know what the worst part is? I thought if I tried harder you would love me. But you never did. Mom reached out her hand but I stepped back. Emily, don't say that, she whispered. But I was already walking to the door. I got in the car, my hands shaking. Their faces, Mom's tears, Dad's coldness, Jake's indifference burned in my memory. I got to my apartment but I didn't go inside. I just sat in the car listening to the silence. It was the last blow. I gave them everything and they gave it to him. And now I was standing on the edge, should I hold on to them or let them go? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing, I would no longer be invisible. I sat in my car in front of my apartment, staring at the darkness outside the window. The engine had long since died but I couldn't bring myself to get out. After that meeting with my parents, after their coldness, my mom's tears, Jake's indifference, I felt as broken as a glass that had fallen on concrete. But there was a small light burning under the shards. Not anger, not pain, but something new. I realized that I could no longer wait for their love. If I wanted to live, I had to find my own way. And damn it, I'm going to do it. The road home was blurry in my eyes, tears were flowing, but I didn't stop. Their words kept running through my head. You can do it. Jake needs us. Every sound cut, but with every mile I felt something let go. I couldn't change them. I couldn't make them see me, but I could change me. And that was my first step, not toward them but away from them. The next day I woke up with a heavy heart but a clear head. The world had not ended. The sun was shining through the window, the coffee smelled the same as always. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop and started searching. Not cruises for them but something for myself. Mexico. I'd been dreaming about it for years, hot sand, salty air, music in the streets. I opened the ticket website and my fingers trembled when I saw the price. It was affordable. Not cheap, but I could afford it. And for the first time I didn't ask myself if I deserved it. I just ordered it. While I was packing my suitcase, the phone rang. It was my mom. I didn't pick up the phone. Then a message came. Emily, we need to talk. We didn't mean to offend you. I read it and put the phone down. Their words no longer had weight. They could cry and make excuses, but it didn't change the truth. I had been invisible to them for too long. And I was tired of asking them to open their eyes. Jake wrote later, you're overreacting. They're upset. I laughed out loud, dryly, almost angrily. Upset? What about me? The years of holding their world together, of giving everything to make them smile? I didn't answer. I let him think what he wanted. He wasn't my enemy, but he was no longer my brother in the sense that I had once invested in him. A week later I was standing at the airport. Bag on my shoulder, ticket in hand. People were buzzing around me but I felt calm for the first time in a long time. The plane took off and when I saw the ground below, something in my chest melted. I didn't know what would happen to my family. Maybe one day they would understand. Maybe they would call me with a real apology. Or maybe I would forever remain their reliable Emily, who could handle it on her own. But it didn't matter anymore. I stood barefoot on the beach in Mexico, the waves lapping at my feet. The sun was baking my skin and I felt alive. Not someone's daughter, not someone's sister, but just me. I remembered the cruise, the moment I saw Jake's photo on the ship. At the time I thought it was the end. But now I knew it was the beginning. I gave them everything and they chose him. And in that choice I found freedom. I didn't come home with a plan of revenge or great forgiveness. I came back with a quiet strength. My parents can live their lives, Jake can live his. But I will no longer be their shadow. If they want to find me, the door is open, but I won't wait. I have me and that's enough. Standing there on that beach, I felt the wind carry my thoughts away. Will I ever come back to them? Would I ever be able to forgive them? I didn't know. And for the first time it didn't torment me. I was moving forward and that was enough. My path had begun, not theirs but mine. And where it will lead me I will see.